This is the deep dive into the Qur'an they never wanted anyone to do. Not scholars, not truthers, not the devout. We're not just decoding the book. You're about to watch me dissect it. They said it was the final message, but if it came after the flood, after the giants were turned to stone, after the old world was buried, then who was speaking and who stayed silent? The Qur'an wasn't just written, it was compiled, edited, rearranged by men after battle, under blood. And with missing verses they now call abrogated. But why would God need edits? Why do parts of it echo Babylon? Why do its laws match Roman code? Why do we find stories rewritten, recycled, reduced? Why do we see jinn but no giants? Fallen angels but no watchers? And why does the book that claims divine origin speak in legal contracts and war threats? This isn't blasphemy. This is for those who remember what came before scripture, before language, before the system rewrote the sky. They told you it was untouched, the final word. But even the Qur'an has edits, missing verses, forgotten chapters, foreign words, pagan symbols, and warnings that were never meant to survive. In this episode, we rip the cover off the Untouched book. We trace the timelines, the contradictions, the borrowed mythologies. We show you where it was preserved and where it was hijacked. Because if the Qur'an was written after the flood, after the destruction of the giants, after the watchers fell and the veils were sealed, then who exactly was giving the message? And what were they trying to stop you from remembering? That this isn't about disrespect, this is about recovery. Because the truth was never meant to be kept in a book. It was carved into stone and buried beneath your feet. Watch now, before they delete what's left. They say the Qur'an was revealed in the 7th century, but the flood was long before that. Tartaria had already fallen, the giants were already buried, the watchers already cast down, and Babylon had already bled the world dry. So how is this the final revelation, when it never mentioned Tartaria, never warned about the resets, never spoke of the mud flood, never even names Atlantis? What kind of all-knowing record skips the beginning? Was the Qur'an delivered to humanity or handed down to a system that was already installed? They say the Qur'an is untouched, but even within the text, Allah abrogates himself. Verses replaced by better ones, revealed then deleted. So let me ask you, if it's perfect, why edit it at all? Surah Al-Baqarah 106. We do not abrogate a verse or cause it to be forgotten except that we bring forth one better than it. Do you call that divine, or is that legal flexibility wrapped in divine cloth? Moses, Noah, Jesus all show up again, same names, slightly changed scenes. But the roots, Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian. And the verses sound familiar because they are from the Torah, from the Gospels, from oral stories carried by tribes scattered after the collapse. So what are we looking at here? A final revelation or a remix? The Bible names them, the Book of Enoch records them. Petroglyphs carve them, mountains wear their faces. So why does it ignore them? Why are the Nephilim erased? It speaks of jinn made of fire, but says nothing of the giants made of stone. It warns of Shaitan, but never names Azazel. It speaks of Pharaoh, but hides the tech he ruled with. Tell me, is that revelation or restriction? It gave you war codes, inheritance charts, marital clauses, blood retaliation, and death penalties. It gave you a system, a structure, but not freedom, not memory, not origin. Beat, breath, then the fire ignites. It doesn't tell you where you came from before the clay. It doesn't tell you how your soul was formed in the stars. Only what to do with it once it's trapped in a body. It punishes questions, it rewards submission, it praises those who stay silent. But the soul wasn't made to kneel, it was made to remember. The Qur'an says it came as a mercy, but mercy doesn't threaten, it doesn't override ancient memory. It doesn't bury Atlantis, hide Tartaria, or silence the names of the fallen sons. The Qur'an calls the earth a sign, a reflection, a proof of God. But then it ignores what's written across her skin, the bones in the cliffs, the petrified titans, the mud flood scars, the fossils of truth. The Qur'an gave you laws, instructions, contracts, obedience, fear 5 times a day, bow, don't ask why, don't remember before, just submit. The Qur'an was written in Arabic, clear, structured, rhythmic. But Arabic wasn't the first language, it wasn't even the original code. Before letters curved into script, there were symbols, geometries, glyphs that held sound and sound that held power, narration, more deliberate, the veil lifting line by line. The Qur'an says this is a book revealed in a clear Arabic tongue. But what if clarity wasn't the goal? What if that tongue was already tamed? What if the real language, the one used to shape stars, to lock gates, to encode memory, was never meant to be spoken? Shift tone, colder, like decoding a cipher built to cage light. The runes, the sigils. The stone spirals carved into temple walls, caves, bones, mountain faces. They weren't decorations, they were keys. Keys to memory, to resonance, to exit. But the Quran never mentions them, never names the language beneath the language. The primordial frequency, the sigil script of the ones who built the first grid. Instead, it was translated, standardized, canonized, placed into 114 chapters, numbered, formatted, systematized, not encoded for awakening, but formatted for obedience. Because the soul doesn't speak Arabic, it remembers vibration. And vibration doesn't kneel. That's why the runes were erased. That's why the Quran never mentions them. Because if you read the symbols, you don't need the book. The Quran warns you about the jinn, made of smokeless fire, unseen, watching, whispering. They speak in the dark, they tempt, they possess, they lie. But here's the trap. If you follow the jinn, you never reach the throne, because the jinn aren't gods, they're not holy, they're not higher. They're middlemen, gatekeepers, distractions. The Quran fixates on them, pages warning you, stories of them listening to the Prophet, joining the prayer, spying, fleeing, hiding. But what does it not tell you? It doesn't tell you what the jinn serve. It doesn't tell you who created them. It doesn't tell you the real agenda, to keep you chasing shadows while the true rulers sit in silence. Like a dagger in velvet, you were taught to fear the jinn, to blame the jinn, to obsess over the jinn, but not to rise above them. Because if you ever look past them, you'd see what they were hiding. The Quran speaks of Adam, the first man, the one the angels were told to bow to, but it never mentions Lilith, the first woman who refused to kneel, the one made from the same earth, not his rib. She was erased because obedience was the new order, and Lilith didn't kneel to systems. It speaks of angels, but not the watchers. It speaks of Iblis, but not Azazel. It speaks of the fall, but never what was lost before it. It gives you Adam, but not the worlds he came from. Instead, it gives you jinn, whispering spirits made of fire, unseen everywhere, lurking, watching, influencing. Every book talks about the end, the judgment, the trumpet, the return. But none of them tell you what came before the beginning. Before Adam, before clay, before breath, there were worlds, empires, bloodlines, and war. No one tells you what fell before the fall. No one tells you the mountains weren't made, they collapsed. The gods didn't rise, they were thrown down, and the first throne, it wasn't empty. They edited the timeline, replaced the originals, cloned the system, gave you laws instead of memory, gave you rituals instead of light, gave you a god that needs submission because you forgot you were never meant to kneel. You were made of stars, of something older than books. But they wrapped your soul in scripture, stamped your path in fire, and told you to obey or burn. But obedience is not the origin, and fear is not salvation. You were taught to prepare for the end, but never told what they did at the start. Because if you ever remembered that, the edits would collapse, the clones would glitch, and the mountains would start to move. They tell you mountains are the bones of the earth, but they never tell you whose bones. Before Adam, before the Quran, before the angels were told to bow, there were titans, beings of impossible size, ancient power, walking rulers of a world we were never meant to inherit. They weren't myths. They were the first design, original architecture. Not created from clay, but forged in light and density this realm can no longer hold. When the war came, they didn't die. They were turned to stone, frozen mid-battle. Limbs collapsed into valleys, faces buried beneath continents, spines rising as mountain ranges. The Quran calls mountains pegs, stabilizers, fixed firmly into the earth. But it doesn't explain why they needed to be fixed or what they were pinning down. Because if you ever remembered that, the edits would collapse, the clones would glitch, and the mountains would start to move. The Quran claims to begin at the beginning, creation. The black stone, set into the Kaaba, circled by millions. But the Quran never names it, never describes it, never tells you where it came from. Just like the Ark of the Covenant, just like the tablets, it's there, but silent. You're told not to question it, but isn't that exactly what they said about idols? What if that stone isn't for you? What if it's not holy, but holding something back? In the Quran, Abraham is a chosen one. He destroys idols, he builds the Kaaba. He nearly sacrifices his son. But which son, which God, which altar? Because this Abraham story mirrors the Torah, mirrors the Zoroastrians, mirrors the myths of ancient Mesopotamia. It's not original, it's inherited and patched to fit a new system. The Quran tells you Mary was a virgin, chosen, set apart, a vessel. It says she was visited by an angel and gave birth to a son without a man. But that story isn't unique, it's not original, it's not even exclusive to the Qur'an. It was lifted, repackaged, inserted. The Egyptian goddess Isis gave birth to Horus the same way, divine conception by a spirit, no earthly father. Mithras, Dionysus, Krishna, even Buddha, born of virgins. The virgin birth isn't revelation, it's repetition. In Surah Maryam, the Qur'an gives you the scene again. Mary retreats, the angel appears, a child is placed in her womb by command. But it strips the context. No bloodline, no Essene connection, no sacred lineage, no history of who she was before the story began. It erases the feminine power, turns Mary into a vessel, obedient, silent, controlled. It removes her sovereignty and replaces it with submission. The Quran honors Mary, but it edits her, preserves her image, but severs her roots. It hides what she really carried, who she was before the angel came. Because if you knew what line she came from, you'd question who really sent the messenger. And why the truth keeps getting rewritten in the same divine format, just without the fire. The Quran says Mary was visited by Gabriel, the messenger, the same figure who delivers revelation, the same one who speaks for God. But Gabriel shows up every time the script gets rewritten. He's there in the Torah, he's there in the Bible, he's there in the Quran. 3 books, 3 empires, 3 edits, same messenger. But who sent him? And why is the divine voice always filtered through the same middleman? In the Quran, Gabriel delivers the message to Mary, to Muhammad, but never shows his source. He claims to speak on behalf of the Most High, but you never hear the Most High directly. You're always hearing through Gabriel, and yet Gabriel never tells you the names of the Watchers, never speaks of the Titans, never warns about the seals, the resets, or the real structure beneath this realm. He gives you obedience, judgment, ritual, contracts. He comes in caves, in isolation, in dreams, and every time the result is a new system, a new book, a new version, a new loop. If he truly served light, why does every message deepen control? Why does each text build a stricter cage? Why does every encounter with Gabriel end in submission? What if Gabriel wasn't just a messenger, but a handler? What if the voice you trusted wasn't from above? They told you it was revelation, but it was redaction. They gave you prophets, but erased the blood. They handed you rules, but buried the reasons. They gave you Gabriel, but not his origin. They told you the story started with Adam, but the bones say otherwise. They gave you jinn to fear, so you'd never look past them. The Quran gave you a system, but the earth gave you memory. And memory doesn't kneel, it rises. This was never about belief. It was about remembering what came before they told you how to think. And now that you remember, you're dangerous.